back to the studio. Ooh, it sounds funny in here today. Maybe it's my ears. Well, I looked and looked and looked at the comments, and every single comment that I read said yay sashing. So today what I'm going to do is pick between one of the two sashings that I went shopping for the Noah's Ark pattern. And then I'm going to cut up some strips. Now the instructions don't have any instructions for cutting these sashing, so I'm just going to make those up as I go. Whenever I do sashing or inner border, my go-to size is always 1.5 inches wide, and then I always measure the pieces exactly and cut them that size. When you do 1.5 inch strips, by the time you sew 1/4 inch on each side, you're left with a 1 inch strip, which is a pretty good visual for me on just about any case. So that's a 1 inch strip finished, so is this. So anytime you see in the studio, just about everything that I've done in here is a finished 1 inch strip. So I have two different pieces that I went shopping for. They are very similar in color. They're both kind of acid green, and they both have either dots or circles on them, and so I liked both of those. I'll pull the camera in a little bit closer so you can see them, and I'll let you look, and I'll tell you a little bit about why I am choosing which one I did. I picked both of these up at the same time, and I liked the color of both of them. I had the blocks with me, and I really thought both of these matched the blocks really well, the green in the blocks. I thought they were a dead ringer for that. And when I bought it, I thought maybe these dots were too big for this kit, and so I liked this one. I thought the red plaid really pulled in more of the colors in the kit, but also I feel like I may have used this fabric at one point for a Christmas project, and it really makes me read Christmas, makes me think of Christmas. And just as I'm standing here, I didn't realize it before, but this they used Christmas trees as the selvage to show you all the different colors that are actually in this pattern. This one just has little tiny dots, and those almost make me think of snowflakes. In the end, I think I'm going to go with this one. This one really made me feel like it was the closest thing to something that would have actually been in the kit. Even though the circles are kind of quite a bit larger than what was in the kit, I still really feel like it really goes with the kit really well. So sometimes you'll get a full circle in the sashing, and sometimes it'll be eclipsed on either side where it's cut off. So I'm going to go ahead and get this ironed, and I'm going to cut off some sashing pieces. I know I'm going to need a solid strip on each side here and one up here and here, because this is 30 inch and this is 40 inch, so I'm going to need 4 pieces there. I'm going to need another piece here because that's going to be 30 inches, and then I'll probably cut 2 or 3 more for these pieces. I'm not going to try and do the math exactly because I've got plenty of this green, so I'll just cut me a couple extra pieces, and then I'll bring them downstairs, and we can cut them up and get them sewing on the machine. Wow, it really is stuffy up there today. Well, I cut 8 strips 1.5 inches wide by the width of fabric, and so I know 4 of these strips are going to be for the top and bottom and the 2 sides, so I'm just going to take those and set those aside, and then I'm going to do 2 of the easy ones first. On the piece here, we know that there's going to be 1 strip going between Noah's Ark and the other 5 pieces. So I'm going to cut 1 piece that's going to go on top of the Noah's Ark, and then I'm going to sew that in place. And then the next largest piece is the giraffes. So I'm going to measure a piece that is the same height as the giraffes, and then I'm going to sew that to the side of the giraffes. And then I'm going to work on the 4 other blocks. So So I'm going to take those two over. I have a little cutting mat next to the sewing machine, and I'll get my sewing machine set up and we'll work on those two. Well, I think I have everything set up. I recently got my machine back from servicing while I was away. I took it to service because it was making a lot of noise the last time. I actually didn't notice it when I was using it, but when I edited the video, the machine sounded really, really loud. So I went ahead and took it to service while I was going to be out of town. And they cleaned it and everything, but she said she didn't really notice anything particularly wrong with it. And then, as things would happen, while I was looking online, I happened to find an advertisement for a muffling mat that goes underneath the sewing machine. It's supposed to make the machine run a lot quieter. So I ordered that and it came, so we'll see if that makes any difference or not. I don't know if I'll notice it here until I edit the video, but I'll certainly notice it then. So I've got the machine threaded, and I'm going to go ahead and sew on my first strip, and I want to make sure that I am sewing it on the correct side, and I don't think I am. Glad I caught that. I do really good rip-it stitches though. Those are frog stitches. Rip it, get it? That's what they used to call it at kids camp, when the summer camp, when all the kids were there. All the kids would bring their mistake stitches to me and let me rip them for them, because I was the fastest frog stitcher in the store. Well, it's certainly sewing quieter to my ears. I hope it's sewing quieter to yours as well. This one's a little bit easier for me to tell if it's on the right place because it goes on the top. Once I get these two pieces on, then I can go ahead and press them seams in place, and then I will press the seam, flip the piece up and press it again. I haven't even started looking yet for a panto for this particular quilt. It's always one of the fun steps. We had one cool day, but like much of the country, the heat index is really high, somewhere over 100. And I don't always have the air conditioning on out here if I don't think I'm going to be out here very long. I had said I drove to Florida and back, and on both routes we went through West Virginia on the way down and through the Smoky Mountains on the way up, and my ears have not been the same since we got back. There's like a echo or something. I just don't even sound right to myself. So I don't know if I sound right to you, but I don't sound right to myself. I'm going to go ahead and iron, and we'll have to turn the iron on, and then I'll show you what these particular seams look like. So I'm pretty sure I have this on the right side. I've got my seam, my little sashing on there, and I haven't flipped it open yet. I always like to press the seam the way it's ironed or sewn. I've always heard that presses the seam flat, and then I will take the iron and lift up that fabric and just use the iron to press that open. Now I'm not pressing the seam open, I'm just pushing that fabric over so I don't get an accordion pleat there. So I get a really nice press. And if I did my job well, you won't be able to see any of the green poking out on my fold. And I did get a tiny bit there. So I can go ahead and put this piece aside. And then I could do this one. I was kind of sad when I got back. Our local county fair was shorter this year than it has ever been before. Our local county fair in the county that I live in is always the same month as my birthday. And I don't go on any of the rides, I just like to go over and get a sugar waffle. So I usually go over on Sunday because that's a free day to get in. It's the last day of the fair. But this year they tricked me and the fair ended on Thursday, 3 days before my free day. So I couldn't go over to the fair and get my free waffle. So I waited until the next fair, which was at our neighboring county, and we went over to that one instead. But I don't know if you know it, but every county is in our area is required to have a fair. That's why they have them, but ours isn't a very good one. But they do that so that the 4-H and all of the different organizations can have their animal shows, like the pigs and the goats, and also the people can have their cakes and their turnips and their pumpkins. I've never entered a quilt there because I don't like the way they display them. I'm always afraid that someone will go in there and snatch a quilt. I would be terrified if somebody went in and snatched my quilt. I don't know if that's ever happened, but I don't see anybody really watching them. Okay, so I have the other 4 pieces left. I'm going to put those in order here so I can figure out which pieces to do next. I have the lion here. Cow. Okay, so if I put sashing on these 2 pieces and then 1 piece across here, that should do it. So I'll bring these 2 over. I don't know if I have enough. That one is big enough for that scrap, and that one's big enough for that. So I'm going to take these 2 scraps over and I'll save that. These pieces are always exactly the same height as the block, so that's easy. The width is always the same. They're always, in my case, 1.5 inches, so that's pretty easy too. So all I have to do now is sew these 2 seams on, and then once we get these on, we'll just do the sashing between the middle. Well, we'll sew the other 2 blocks on the side, and then we'll do the middle piece. Now I've left this block and this piece here under the foot of the machine, and I'm just going to do the next piece without cutting the thread, and this is what they call chain piecing. Nothing really very fancy about it, it just is a way to save some of your thread. So now I'm going to go ahead and press these two pieces. See, there's a very little tiny piece of thread in between there, and it's a lot better than having big long tails on all your pieces. So I have my first block with a strip. Now I'm going to add my second block to that strip itself, and I'm going to do that twice for the first row and the second row. Repeat that again. Now we're going to iron these again, and we'll do one strip between the two. Once we have those 4 blocks joined, we can go ahead and add the giraffe to the side, and once the giraffe is joined, we can go ahead and add the Noah's Ark to the bottom, and then we'll have the full body of the quilt done. Once we have that, we're going to go ahead and add the inner border around the whole piece, which is going to be that same sashing fabric, and then we'll go ahead and choose that outer border. I have this strip cut that's equal size to the 2 blocks plus the sashing, but I noticed that I have the piece at the top of this block when really it goes here, so it could go in between the 2 sets. So I'm going to move that down and get it in position, and I'm going to set it up. And again, it'll just take a minute to get that one piece sewn. Once I get that sewn on there using my 1/4 inch seam allowance, now I can go ahead and repeat. One of the things with blocks that have seam sashing, you want to check and make sure that The sashing matches from one set to the other. Sometimes it's easy just to get caught up that the two ends meet, but you really do want the sashings to meet also. And the nice thing is to just curl it back and make sure that the sashings are doing exactly that they're matching up. So I'm just going to put a pin on it. I'm not afraid of using a pin if I need it. If I'm not careful, I get bad posture because I'm trying to look under the machine to see the needle. Next thing I know, I'm hunching over. So I'm going to go ahead and press that, and then we can go ahead and add the giraffe. So I have the bottom Noah's Ark already, and I have all of the top pieces. Now, one of the things that I do, when I cut my blocks, I always cut them a little tiny bit extra size. That's my own problem. And I didn't trim them down when I assembled the blocks. So the blocks were a little bit too big. So when I got to put the arc on the bottom, the arc was a little bit undersized. So the arc block was a total 1 inch smaller than the above portion. So I just cut a ½ inch off of each side of this, all the way down, ½ inch, ½ inch. That way it matched. So that was not a big problem. I just had to do it. So I'm going to get this lined up, make sure I'm doing it the right way. In this particular case, I really don't have any sashing bars that need to line up, but I am going to put some pins in there because it's a much bigger piece, and it's just going to help make sure I get it under the machine straight. I really can feel that heat wave today. It's not just hot, it's humid too. And that always, I think, makes it worse. I know I've mentioned before, this building used to be an old carriage house. And I haven't had the air conditioning on out here for a while. So when it's really hot out here, you can kind of smell the history of the building. Now, I don't mean like manure or anything, but you can smell the old wood. You can smell the old beams in here. I remember when the building was going under its renovation so that it looked like it does today. There was a lot of cleaning of the old wood. We even sprayed the old wood with Febreze, trying to get rid of some of that kind of musky old wood smell. Upside down. I'm glad I checked. Yep. They would have all been upside down. Good thing I know that frog stitch. This is what happens when your brain gets overheated. I'm glad I didn't iron it before I found that out. I think if you can get the stitches ripped out before you iron it, it makes it eminently better. See if we can try this one more time. Right side up this time. Will be better. So again, I'm going to pin. Nothing's changed about that. Still trying to practice my posture. I've tried to find taller cabinets. I don't think it's just men. I think it's probably the same for taller women as well. But it's hard when you're taller to fit under these machines. I tried to get those things that sit under the wheels to build the machine up, but for some reason they don't seem to help either. They seem to be awkward. I've heard of some people getting a custom machine made or a cabinet made, but that seems really expensive. I don't have that kind of money. That reminds me of something. A lot of times people ask when I was teaching a class, you know, should I rip it out? Should I go ahead? Some people are always striving for perfection, some people not so much. And I have a guideline that I use for whether or not I should rip something out or not. And my guideline is pretty basic, and that is, can I finish the project without it ruining the project. And in this particular case, I don't really think I could have finished it with half of the blocks upside down. So in this case, I did have to rip. But in some cases, the error is not so egregious that you really have to rip the seam out. So that's just something that I go by. We all have different reasons why we quilt to begin with. Some of us do it as a stress reliever, and so if you're doing it as a stress reliever, you really don't want to stress yourself out by making yourself follow a bunch of rules and make yourself miserable if that's not the intention to begin with. I also like to have things that show your progress and your personality. If you've made mistakes along the way, then you made mistakes. That's who you are. That's what you did. So unless you're doing an art quilt, but I've even seen people do art quilts. I mean, who knows what the intention was on an art quilt even. So it is what it is. Much bigger seam this time. So I'll have to kind of do this in sections. Just sitting funny on there. Set it down. So this is the sashing so far. I know it looks a little cattywampus on the sides, but I can go ahead and trim that up now that the sashing is on. So the next step I'll do is go ahead and put the inner border on the two sides and the top and bottom. Probably I'll do the two sides first, since those will be the closest to the width of the fabric, and then I can put the top and bottom on because I know they'll be plenty wide enough. But I will trim up the sides first after I get it a little more ironed a little better, to make sure that those have a little clean cut on them. So I'll pull off some of these spare threads. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Give it a nice iron, and then I'll put on the two side seams, and then I'll put on the top and bottom. Well, I have the inner border on all four sides of the body of the quilt. So now it's time to go ahead and put the outer border on, and I've chosen this. This is a really almost a dead ringer for the fabric that is used on portions of the arc quilt. It is different, but it's very, very close. So that's why I chose that. This particular one I cut at 4.5 inches. So by the time it's sewn on with the binding, it'll be about 4 inches, which is very similar to some of the other ones that I've done. So I'm going to go ahead and it doesn't matter on this one because I got 2 yards of this, and I have these pieces cut the length. So it's not going to matter which I do first. So I'm going to go ahead and sew probably the top and bottom on first, and then the two sides, and then this will pretty much be finished. I'm not going to get to quilting it today, but I will get the borders on. So as it's gotten hotter and hotter in the studio today, I was more and more motivated to finish. So I didn't go ahead and make you watch me do the inner border and outer border, but I did get those on. I think the outer border goes really well with some of the arc pieces. They really look like almost identical pieces to the arc. So a trivia question I have for you, I just heard this recently. If you know, how many people were on the arc? See if you have anyone knows the answer to that. You can add that in the comment section if you know. I was thinking this morning, one of the sad things for me is that I don't get to see your faces when I'm doing this. I almost wish it was kind of like a Zoom call, because I think it would be nice just to see your expressions. It would make me, I think, smile a little bit more if I was seeing you smiling, or laugh when I'm laughing. But the nice thing that I do get is when I get to see the comments that you leave. I was looking at the comments before I taped today because I wanted to see how many people were saying sashing yes or no. And today there was a particularly large amount of comments. They weren't just about the Noah's Ark. It's always funny because you can always see what people are watching at any given time because that's what they're commenting on. And some of them go way back to some of the beginning videos, but it just shows you what videos they're watching, so that's always interesting. But I thank you for commenting because that just makes me feel good. It's the one bit of feedback that I get. So I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway, thank you for your time joining us in the studio. If you like the way that the sashing turned out and the outer border, you can go ahead and comment on that. Or if you know how many people were on the Ark, you could go in and comment that. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for stopping in today. Until you come back again, which next time we'll be putting on the dragonfly when I find that. And I have to do the quilting. Haven't chosen a quilting pattern yet, and I haven't chosen my backing. Until then, take care of yourself and take care of each other.